When someone stops loving you, they don't always say it out loud. They don't hand you a warning or a deadline or a final notice. What they do is far more subtle and far more painful. It shows up in the way they talk to you, the way they look at you, and the way they suddenly stop doing the little things they once did without thinking. But here's the truth. You're not crazy and you're not too sensitive. You're noticing shifts that mean something. And the moment you understand these signs, you reclaim your clarity, your confidence, and your power. So let's talk about the 10 signs your partner doesn't love you because you deserve to see the truth clearly, even when it hurts. When love starts to fade, it rarely announces itself with a dramatic moment. It slips in quietly, almost unnoticed, through the small details of everyday life. And the first place you feel it is in the emotional atmosphere between you and the person you care about. Emotional disconnection doesn't happen overnight. It happens in the pauses, in the tone, in the silence that suddenly feels heavy instead of comfortable. It happens in the space they stop filling. You start noticing they're no longer tuned in the way they once were. Before, they used to notice when something was off with you. They'd pick up on your mood, your stress, your energy without you even saying a word. Now, you could be sitting right next to them, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained, and they wouldn't ask a single question. They don't check in the way they used to. They don't lean in. They don't pay attention to what you're feeling. It's not that they can't, it's that they don't. There's a shift in their presence. They're physically around, but emotionally distant. You can be having a conversation with them and still feel like you're talking to a wall. They nod. They say, mm-hmm. They hear the words, but they're not receiving the message. You start to feel like you're interrupting their world instead of being welcomed into it. And one of the most painful parts is that you remember how it used to feel, how they once lit up at the sound of your voice, how they once cared about the little things your day, your thoughts, your worries, your excitement. They used to celebrate your wins and soften your losses. They used to make you feel seen, but emotional disconnection makes you feel invisible in the relationship you're still trying to hold together. It's subtle at first. They stop asking about your day. They stop noticing your effort. They stop being curious about your thoughts or your feelings. You catch them scrolling, zoning out, doing anything but being engaged with you, and you try to tell yourself it's stress or distraction or just a phase. And maybe it is, but when it becomes a pattern, that pattern becomes a message. Because when someone loves you, they stay emotionally present even when life gets busy. They try, they show up, they reach back when you reach out. But someone who's emotionally disconnecting will start pulling away even when nothing is wrong externally. You'll feel yourself working harder to bridge the gap, trying to close the distance, while they act like they don't even notice the space that's growing between you. And sometimes the disconnection shows up in the way they respond to your vulnerability. You share something personal, something painful, something you need comfort for, and their reaction feels cold, distracted, or indifferent. They give you a surface level that sucks, or you'll be fine, but there's no depth behind it, no empathy, no effort to understand. And that's not how someone behaves when they're emotionally invested. What hurts the most is the loneliness that creeps in while the relationship is still technically intact. You start feeling like you're carrying the emotional load alone. You start apologizing for wanting connection. You start doubting yourself, wondering if maybe you're asking for too much, when all you're really asking for is the bare minimum: attention, care, presence. And the truth is, emotional disconnection is one of the earliest signs that love is either fading or already gone. It's the quiet shift that tells you the conversations aren't safe anymore, the comfort isn't mutual, and the connection isn't being protected the way it once was. You can feel when someone's heart is stepping back, even if their body is still standing right in front of you. And the hardest part, once emotional connection breaks, everything else begins to follow. That's the moment you have to ask yourself, are you holding on to someone who has already let go? Communication is one of the clearest windows into how someone feels about you, because people don't hide their love nearly as well as they hide their words. When someone still cares, you can hear it in the way they talk to you. Their tone softens, Their patience stays intact. Their responses carry intention, not obligation. But when love starts slipping away, communication is the first place you'll notice the shift, long before the relationship even looks broken on the outside. It starts small. They used to initiate conversations. They'd send little updates, check on you, ask how your day was going, or share something funny that made them think of you. But now, the dynamic has flipped. You're the one keeping the communication alive. You're the one asking questions, reaching out, trying to keep things flowing, and they're doing the bare minimum to keep the conversation from dying completely. Not because they're busy, everyone gets busy, but because the desire behind their communication has weakened. There's a difference between someone being short because they're tired and someone being short because they're detached. You can feel it. The tone changes. Their responses become dry, passive, or clipped. You can almost hear the lack of interest through the screen or across the room. They don't ask follow-up questions. They don't add depth. They don't invite connection. The conversation becomes something they're participating in only because you initiated it, not because they genuinely want to be part of it. And you start noticing the timing. Before, you never had to wonder how they felt because their effort made it clear. Now you're waiting hours, sometimes a whole day, for a reply that took them 5 seconds to type. They say, "I'm not good at texting," or "I've just been busy." But they weren't too busy before. They weren't too tired before. They weren't too overwhelmed before. The only thing that's changed is their investment. When someone's love is present, communication feels natural. It flows. Even in conflict, it feels like two people trying to understand each other. But when love starts to fade, communication becomes a chore to them. Suddenly, every conversation feels like you're asking for something. Even the simple things, clarity, reassurance, connection, feel like a burden to them. They get defensive, irritated, or dismissive over questions that used to be normal. You start feeling like you're nagging when all you're doing is trying to stay connected. And it's not just the words they say, it's the ones they don't. They stop expressing appreciation. They stop giving compliments. They stop acknowledging your effort. They stop saying the little things that once made you feel valued. Their emotional silence becomes louder than anything they could have said out loud. The worst part is, you start shrinking yourself to avoid starting a problem. You hold back your thoughts, your concerns, your feelings, because the moment you bring anything up, the conversation turns tense. You begin editing yourself to avoid reactions that didn't used to exist. And that's what communication without love feels like. Walking on eggshells around someone who once welcomed your voice. But here's the truth. You can't ignore someone who still loves you, wants to understand you. They want to talk to you. They want to hear you. They don't run from conversations that build connection. They lean into them. And when communication breaks, it's rarely about the words. It's about the heart behind them. When that heart pulls back, everything starts sounding hollow. Because communication isn't dying because you're talking too much. It's dying because they've stopped caring enough to listen. Love isn't just about words. It's about action, consistency, and effort. When someone truly loves you, they show it in the way they prioritize you, the way they invest time and energy, and the way they nurture the relationship without being asked. But when love starts to fade, the effort fades first, often in ways that are subtle but unmistakable if you pay attention. You begin to notice that you're the one carrying the weight, while the other person no longer shows up in the ways they once did. It starts with small gestures that disappear. They used to plan things for you. They used to make time for dates, surprises, or even simple shared moments. Now, those things stop happening unless you ask, and even then, they feel half-hearted. They used to help with the little tasks that made life easier, remembering appointments, running errands together, or helping with something that mattered to you. But now it's always on you, and any attempt to involve them is met with excuses, sighs, or minimal participation. It's not laziness. It's a reflection of the heart behind the effort. When someone stops investing, it's because they no longer see the relationship as something worth sustaining. You might start noticing patterns in the everyday. They show up late, cancel plans, or leave the resolution of conflicts entirely up to you. The emotional labor of keeping the relationship alive becomes one-sided. You're apologizing for issues that shouldn't be yours alone to solve. You're initiating the difficult conversations. You're asking for compromises while they wait for you to adjust. That imbalance isn't accidental. It's a sign that the connection has shifted. And it's not just the big things. It's in the micro moments, the gestures that used to come naturally. They no longer check if you've eaten. They don't notice when you're tired or stressed. They don't celebrate your successes or console your failures. When love is present, these things are automatic. When love fades, they become optional, and if you're left feeling like you have to ask for what should be freely given, it's a clear signal that the emotional investment has dwindled. There's also a sense of expectation without reciprocity. They may still want the benefits of a relationship, the comfort, the presence, the companionship, but they're no longer willing to contribute equally. You begin to feel drained because the balance of giving and receiving has tipped completely in their favor. The energy you pour in doesn't come back to you. And it hurts because relationships aren't supposed to be exhausting. They're supposed to feel mutually sustaining, like two people lifting each other rather than one person carrying everything alone. Another way this shows up is in the unwillingness to compromise. Love requires effort, not just in actions, but in flexibility. When someone no longer loves you, they stop bending, stop negotiating, stop caring enough to find middle ground. The relationship becomes a place where your needs take a back seat, or worse, become inconvenient. You feel like your presence, your desires, and your feelings are burdens. And when you look back at how things used to be, the difference is unmistakable. What's hardest to realize is that effort is love in motion. When it disappears, the absence itself is a message. You don't have to guess if someone still cares. You can measure it by whether they are willing to show up day after day in ways both big and small. And when that effort stops, the truth becomes clear. The love that once fueled those actions is no longer there. Because relationships survive on the momentum of consistent, intentional care. When the care disappears, everything else starts to crumble. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, am I holding on to someone who no longer chooses to invest in us? Physical affection is one of the most honest mirrors of how someone feels about you. When love is alive, touch is instinctive. Hugs, kisses, holding hands, leaning in, they happen without thought because they're fueled by genuine desire and care. But when love begins to fade, those gestures become rare, mechanical, or even absent altogether. And it's in that absence, in the subtle ways warmth disappears, that the truth becomes undeniable. At first, it's small things. A hug feels shorter, less intentional. A kiss feels hurried or distracted. They may touch you, but it no longer carries the comfort or intimacy it once did. The connection that used to flow through these gestures is gone. Physical affection isn't just about desire, it's about emotional presence. When someone's heart steps back, the way they use their body shows it more clearly than any words could. You start noticing patterns over time. They may avoid holding hands in public, or they pull away when you reach for them. They may sit beside you without really being beside you, arms crossed, body turned slightly away. There's a distance that wasn't there before, a barrier between your physical selves that mirrors the emotional gap growing between you. And it hurts because these are not things you're imagining. They are the body language of someone no longer invested in keeping intimacy alive. Sometimes affection doesn't disappear completely, it becomes forced. You may notice that the hugs or kisses happen because you initiate them, and when they come, they feel like an obligation rather than an expression of care. There's no spark, no warmth, no lingering connection. You feel it in the briefness, in the mechanical way they move, in the absence of eye contact or tenderness. And that's one of the cruelest signals of fading love. It's still there physically, but the heart isn't present. And when physical intimacy is one-sided, it's not just a matter of desire, it's a reflection of imbalance. You may find yourself craving closeness while they remain distant. You may reach out, hoping for a moment of connection, only to feel it brushed aside or minimized. Over time, this creates a cycle of loneliness within the relationship itself. You can be in a partnership, yet feel isolated, because the very human need for touch, warmth, and reassurance is no longer being met. The absence of affection also affects how the mind and heart perceive the relationship. Physical intimacy is a form of communication. It tells us, I see you, I value you, I want you here with me. When it's gone, the mind starts to question everything. You begin to notice how little they initiate closeness, how often they avoid it, and how distant their presence feels even when they are near. And every time this happens, it reinforces the quiet truth you may have been afraid to acknowledge. Love is receding. What makes this so painful is that physical affection is something that can't easily be faked for long. Someone can lie with words, can smile and nod, can make promises, but the absence of warmth, of intentional touch, tells the story the heart can't hide. It's the body speaking what the heart can no longer commit to. And when you notice it, there's no denying it, because love shows up in presence, care, and connection. When the touch stops being meaningful, when the affection disappears, when intimacy becomes mechanical or one-sided, it is a message you cannot ignore. And in that moment, you have to face the truth. If they no longer show love through their touch, then the love that once held the two of you together is no longer alive. One of the clearest signs that someone no longer loves you is the way they respond when you ask for what's normal in a relationship. Love is patient, understanding, and willing to meet basic emotional needs. But when love fades, even the smallest requests start to feel like pressure to them. When you ask for time, reassurance, attention, or understanding, their reactions shift. They may become defensive, irritated, dismissive, or even angry. And that's not because you're asking too much, it's because their heart is no longer invested in giving what's needed. At first, it's subtle. A question you ask in good faith, a simple, "Can we talk?" or "I need your support on this," might be met with sighs, eye rolls, or a tone that makes you second-guess yourself. You might try to convince yourself it's stress, or bad timing, or a rough day. But patterns reveal the truth. When every time you ask for connection, you feel like you're burdening them, it's a message you cannot ignore. Someone who loves you wants to hear your needs, not resent them. You may also notice that your concerns are minimized. They brush off your feelings, tell you you're overreacting, or accuse you of being too sensitive. And what's striking is that these are needs that were once met without argument. Before, asking for clarity or support might have been met with patience and reassurance. Now, it's met with tension and frustration. That shift is the emotional equivalent of turning a light off slowly while the room remains dark. You feel the absence, even if nothing has been explicitly said. Another way this shows up is in avoidance. When someone no longer loves you, they stop addressing issues because addressing them would require effort, care, and vulnerability, things they no longer want to give. Instead, they ignore the problem, change the subject, or leave you to carry the emotional weight alone. You might find yourself apologizing for asking questions that once felt reasonable. You might even hesitate to ask for what's rightfully yours in the relationship because you've learned that doing so creates tension. It's also in the subtle way they frame your needs as inconvenient or unnecessary. Requests for time together, emotional support, or meaningful conversation are met with statements like, "I'm too busy. Can't we just drop it?" Or, "Why do you always have to make a thing out of this?" In relationships where love is present, your needs aren't an inconvenience, they're a priority. Someone who truly loves you doesn't view your desire for connection as a burden, they welcome it. And the hardest part is that you start to internalize it. You begin questioning yourself, wondering if your expectations are too high or if you're asking for too much. You may try to minimize your own needs to make the relationship easier, to avoid conflict, or to win back the warmth that used to be there. But that's the danger of ignoring this sign. It's easy to rationalize, to blame yourself, when the truth is that the lack of love is not about you, it's about them. When someone responds to your legitimate needs with annoyance, defensiveness, or avoidance, it's a clear indication of emotional withdrawal. It's the silent way they tell you they no longer wish to invest in the relationship. And even if they stay physically present, Their unwillingness to meet you halfway emotionally speaks volumes. Because love is active, love is responsive, love listens, and when someone stops listening, when your presence and your needs feel like a problem instead of a priority, that's the moment you have to see the truth. At that point, you must understand, if they cannot meet your basic emotional needs without resentment, their heart is no longer fully with you. When love fades, it often becomes visible in the way someone builds their life, and the hardest part is that you start to see it in the space where you should belong. Relationships are meant to be shared journeys, where both people include each other in plans, dreams, and decisions. But when someone no longer loves you, you begin to notice that the life they're creating no longer has room for you. Their goals, their priorities, their future, all of it seems to move forward without considering your place in it. At first, it might be subtle. They talk about future plans without asking for your opinion or including you in the vision. They make decisions that affect both of you without consulting you, or they make long-term choices that don't account for your presence. They may focus on personal ambitions, friendships, or hobbies, which is healthy in a loving relationship, but the difference is that the balance shifts completely. Where there once was space for you in their dreams, now you're just an observer. You might notice that their schedule no longer aligns with yours, not because of circumstance, but because of choice. They prioritize other people or activities over spending meaningful time with you. They make decisions that affect the household, finances, or daily life without input or collaboration. And it starts to feel like you are not part of the narrative they're writing, but rather a peripheral character in a story they no longer want to co-author with you. Another way this shows itself is in their emotional availability for planning shared experiences. They may resist making future plans together, avoid conversations about long-term commitments, or even dismiss ideas you bring up as unnecessary or inconvenient. When someone loves you, they want to see you in the picture, they actively include you in their plans, consider your desires, and make room for shared experiences. When love fades, they don't. They begin to live in a way that works without you. It's also in the subtle signaling through actions rather than words. You might notice a pattern of choices that consistently exclude you. Trips are planned without discussion.